Welcome to the Airline Pilot Career Workshop that's sponsored by Aerostar Training Services. We're really glad that you're on the line. We actually have a huge number of people from a huge number of places all over. I think we have every continent represented in a lot of different countries, so we're really excited to have you on. That's good news. This is our Airline Pilot Career Workshop, and everyone is muted, but of course you can ask questions by using the chat window, and John will be moderating those questions and adding those to the webinar as we are able. So just go ahead and type those in at any time, and we'll get to those as we can. Please put aside any distractions you have. Turn off your cell phone or anything else, because this is going to be an hour that you're really going to enjoy and learn a lot about airline careers and other things, and it's not often that we get a chance to talk with someone who's really in the business. So I'd like to introduce Captain David Santo, who is a working airline pilot and has been for a number of years. He's worked in private and airline aviation, and is the founder of Aerostar Training Services. And Dave, why don't you take it from there? I know you can explain it a lot better than I have. What cool things you've done in the industry.
Well, hi, Paula. Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to come and speak at this webinar. So I am an active airline captain on the Airbus A320, and I'm one of a couple founders of Aerostar Training Services, which is a 142 certified type rate training organization that provides type ratings for Airbus and Boeing 737 equipment. I've been an airline captain for a number of years with my current employer. Prior to that, I've been around the industry quite extensively, flown a number of different airplanes, everything from corporate jets, piston engine, bank check, flying jobs. I've flown the 747-400, and am currently, as I said, flying the A320.
Right, so you started a number of years ago and have seen a lot of changes in the industry.
I have. It's been a fun career. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a very dynamic career. We've seen the industry go from ups to downs to now it looks like we're trending back to a very positive up.
That's fantastic. That is wonderful news. And we also wanted to introduce Elizabeth Spirito. And we met Elizabeth just briefly when we were in Florida at your facility there. And Elizabeth is quite the logistical wizard, and I wish we could have her able to speak. Unfortunately, the way this webinar is set up, we didn't have her signed in as a panelist. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about Elizabeth, Dave.
Well, Elizabeth is a lady that we work with in our office in Orlando at our headquarters. She deals with customer service, logistics, and really tries to help bring the experience that we're trying to provide, providing wonderful training. She's trying to provide a wonderful experience in getting people enrolled, getting their questions answered, and really seeing them from beginning to end to make sure that the expectation is not only met but exceeded.
Right, exactly. So she's a good person to know as well in the industry. So, all right. So let's go ahead and get started with some questions. And again, if you have a question, please feel free to enter it in the chat window, and we'll just start with some that we had. So, is it still a good career choice to be an airline pilot?
Well, I think so. I don't think people choose to be airline pilots because they think it's a great career choice. I think being an airline pilot is almost a calling. It's a passion. I've dealt with so many pilots, including myself, that I didn't know anybody in the industry as a child growing up. My parents were not in the industry. But yet, if you ask my parents, they would tell you that this is something I always said I wanted to do. So if you're following a passion, if it's something you've dreamed about doing, it's a great career choice. That being said, Paula, probably right now is the best time we've seen in probably 20 years to be getting into this career. We went through a long lull in the industry. And like every cycle, as that cycle comes out, we're now going to go into a very long cycle of strong growth, which means there's going to be high demand. And high demand means that there's going to be career opportunities, better pay, better benefits, really for pilots all over the world. So I'm very, very excited for the young people coming into the industry. I'm excited for the people that are joining the industry later in their careers. They want to make a career change in their 40s or 50s and become pilots. Those opportunities are going to be there now too.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like that's good news compared to and I know there's a lot of people who look at some of the old movies, you know, the some of the old Pan Am ads and things like that, and they say, you know, well, being an airline pilot is just not as glamorous as it used to be. Is that true, or what have you seen?
Well, I think that's probably a true statement. It depends on where you're at in the world. Here in North America and Europe, I don't think the airline profession is particularly glamorous. It's not the catch me if you can movie actor set, but some places of the world it's still very, very highly respected career. And I think even here in North America and in Europe, it's a very well respected career. It's a well-paid career. I think there's lots of benefits associated to it that I think a layman employee would not really have the options to do. So glamorous, I'm not sure I know if it's glamorous or not, but I would say it's been a very, very fun career, and I've truly enjoyed it.
Right. Yeah, you still get to go lots of places. You still have, I think airline pilots still have a lot of perks, you know, like being able to travel to places even when they're not working, you know, other kinds of things that other professions maybe don't have.
Well, if you're a person who thinks that a career is doing a time card, punching a time card, coming to work at 8 in the morning, taking an hour lunch break, and leaving at 5, and doing that 5 days a week, I think that an aviation career is going to be very glamorous. We have the best window seat office view in the world at 35,000 feet. We don't punch a time card. We have days off. We have a very flexible and almost a very irregular schedule. So there's a lot of things about it that if you're somebody who just doesn't like to be in the mundane grind of every day of work, I think you're going to find an airline career is definitely not your average job.
Right. Excellent. So next question, of course, we want to get right down to the nuts and bolts. What kind of salary can I expect?
Well, that's a very good question because it's a pretty wide spectrum. The entry level into the aviation career field is typically flight instructing if you don't come through the military, and I did not. I was a civilian pilot. So I flight instructed. That was, you know, what I would call starvation wages. You were building time, and you transition into either some type of a corporate flying opportunity or a commuter flying opportunity or even some cargo on-demand charter operations, and the pay gets a little better. But I think of it this way, Paula, it's like being a doctor. You don't start out at the top. You have to work your way up. You're going to have to pay your dues a little bit, and this is like being an intern or I forget the other term they use for a doctor while they're going through their initial early stages of building their experience. But it's very much like that.
Right. Yeah, like a resident who doesn't make a whole lot of money, but they work their tails off, I think.
And that's exactly right. And then when you get to the top of the career field, and again, it varies greatly on what region of the world you're in. There are some regions of the world that airline pilots are making in excess of $350,000 a year comparable to U.S. It may not be in U.S. dollars, but you know that's their earning pay. I think you're going to find even here in the U.S. an airline captain is a significant six-figure income if he's flying for a major mainline carrier. If you're flying for a commuter, even some of the commuter jobs, after you build up enough time and experience and move into the left seat, are starting to see better pay wages. But overall, lifetime's earnings, you're looking at a multi-million-dollar job.
Right. There was one conversation that we had not too long ago when you told me there are two different career paths really that an airline pilot can take. You know, one of them is the route that you took, which is basically being a student pilot and building time. And the other is basically going from zero to an airline pilot as quickly as possible, or to a first officer as quickly as possible, and getting that that jump, kind of cutting through that that period of low pay. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think as we're seeing a global demand, and the global demand for airline pilots is really being fueled by the demand for the middle class. As the middle class is getting bigger in what we would have considered under-industrialized or third world countries, that middle class wants to enjoy the opportunity to travel. So when you're looking at the statistics, and these statistics were put out originally by Boeing, but I think they've been validated even by the U.S. Accounting Office, you're looking at almost 500,000 new entrant airline pilots needed over the next 20 years to meet the global demand. Now, the part about that is we've never seen that kind of demand before, and there is not currently the training infrastructure really to even supply that kind of demand. So that's really great news. I mean, this is very well documented and published. How do we take advantage of that? Well, there's a couple things that we can do to take advantage of that. A lot of that training is offshore, and those offshore opportunities are now looking to American pilots and European pilots, North American pilots, to fill their first officer seats because they don't have enough of their nationals who have come up through the ranks who can fill those positions. So we have talked to many folks who've taken a very kind of exciting career choice that wasn't there for me when I was coming up through the ranks, to go fly Airbuses or Boeing equipment outside of the United States for a few years as first officers, as contract pilots, build their experience level, come back to the U.S., and really they kind of leapfrogged or bypassed the rest of us that had to do flight instruction and fly freight in the middle of the night. They really went from flight school ab initio through a type rate program offshore, got a job, built some time up, came back, and they were the front of the line to get the airline job now because they have experience in the A320 and the 737 already.
Right. Right. And then getting seniority quickly, I think, is another thing that you mentioned as being incredibly important.
Well, you know, Paula, like you and I have talked about, seniority in the airlines, it's a really strange system, and I think it's hard for people to get their arms around if they've not been in this industry before. But for most airlines, everything is based on date of hire seniority. So your base assignment, your bid assignments, your aircraft assignments, all are based on how senior you are, what your seniority number is. In my particular airline, for example, we're getting close to about 3,000 pilots, and I'm somewhere around a seniority of 509. That puts me, top 20-some%, a little better than that for pilots, which means I have my pick of bases, or I have a better shot at my pick of bases, and I've now been a captain for a lot longer. Now, the captain pay is still substantially better than first officer pay, depending on how hard you want to work. Mm-hmm. And so I've said that had I had the opportunities that young people have now to break into the industry sooner, to land an airline job, to land that airline job that they want to spend their career at, the quicker you can do that, the quicker you're going to build up your seniority. That's going to equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, in lifetime earnings by the time you retire.
Right, and it's not just money, that's also quality of life because you get to choose, like you said, have a better selection of bases and flights and schedules and really everything that has to do with your life, it sounds like.
Well, and one of the common questions we get asked in the flight school is from parents. The
Hmm.
parents are trying to help their young son or daughter make a decision about, is this a career path that they should pursue? And of course, their parents, not being in aviation or business, they want to know, what's the return on my investment?
Hmm.
If we spend this money, is my investment going to work for my son or daughter? I would have the same question.
Hmm.
And the answer is, we really need to show them what the lifetime earning is versus the initial expense. It's absolutely worth it. Now, I would like to qualify that, because I've had some people call me and email me and push back and say, Dave, I've been stuck in a dead-end commuter job for 20 years. But I typically find that when I press them and say, have you been applying? Have you been trying to make a move into an airline? Typically what I hear is, well, no, I haven't been applying because I don't want to take a pay cut, or I don't want to move, or I don't want to make the sacrifices that would come along with doing that. So I would caution people to say, are there people in this career that have been less successful than others? Absolutely. That's no different than any other career path. I think
Hmm.
there's an old saying that says, successful people are those who do the things that unsuccessful people aren't willing to do or haven't had the opportunity to do.
Right.
I think if you're a person who's dedicated to this career path and you're willing to do what it takes, you can create a tremendous career and be very, very successful at it. But you've got to take ownership with making that happen. It's still not going to just fall on your lap.
Right, right, exactly. And I think that's true of any career. And we've taken a little bit more time with this slide than others, but I think it's really very important to students and to their parents and others, to really understand that that opportunity is there um, for a good salary. All right, so next question, what are the academic qualifications that are required for any of your programs or any programs that you know of?
You know, it's not that challenging academically. I know that people like to promote aviation as being a very, very tough career field. It's not. You do have to be able to memorize. You do have to be able to study and apply yourself. You do need to be able to understand situationally the things that are going on around you. But academic qualifications, really almost anybody could be trained to fly. And I think if you're of average intelligence and average academics, you're going to be successful if you apply yourself.
So you don't have to be a straight A student or be really fantastic at science or math or any of the things
No.
they told me when I was a kid.
When I was growing up, Paula, they told me that I had to be really good at math in school. And,
Hmm.
now I think of the absurdity of, we're not really doing algebraic equations while we're shooting an approach at 200 miles an hour. So if
Hmm.
you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you're probably fine on the math, and the science is not much different.
Right. Okay. That's a relief, I'm sure, to a lot of people on the line, myself included. So, next question: how do international students qualify for training at Aerostar?
Well, Aerostar has been a great organization for me because it allows me to share my passion for this industry. And I have a real passion for teaching. That's what got me interested in starting the school. So I'm very proud of the fact that I'm directly hands-on and involved with a lot of the training on the Airbus side. And I certainly am involved in trying to help support the training that goes on the Boeing side. I think for international students, one of the challenges, of course, is they've still got to learn how to fly the airplane. Everything's going to be the same. But the second language, English and technical English, I think presents a little bit of a little bit more challenge for them. So you need to have that English proficiency down, because you don't want to have to be thinking about translating words while you're trying to fly the airplane.
Hmm.
And as far as getting qualified to come into the United States, there's all kinds of resources available. FAA.gov, you can go on that site and find out everything you need to know about converting your licenses, or you can simply call Elizabeth and myself, we provide a lot of career mentoring to individuals that may never come to us for a type rating, but we still take a lot of pride and we help them find a kind of a direction. So foreign students, absolutely, this is the greatest place to train, in my opinion. It's English immersion. All the controllers speak English, wide open airspaces, low cost of renting aircraft, relatively speaking. I still think it's outrageous, but compared to industry or globally, it's still low cost. I think the U.S. is a great place to train, and I think Aerostar really is a great place to go to finishing school, to grad school, if you will, and add your type rating before you go home and seek out that airline job.
Right. Let me back up and just say, let's kind of separate this out and say international students for ab initio training. And I know you were just kind of talking about international students for finishing school or your graduate degree or your type rating. Do you want to maybe back up and talk a little bit about some of the opportunities for ab initio training? Is it a good choice to come to the U.S. for your complete flight education, or should people start where they are and then come here for their type rating?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend on the individual, but I'm a little biased, and I'm going to say I think the U.S. offers the best training opportunities for ab initio. You know, that I believe that's a Latin root word that says from the beginning.
Right.
And so if you're zero time and you want to go from zero time to completing a commercial multi-engine instrument and an aircraft type rating, there are some tremendous schools here in the U.S. That are positioned not only to help you with that, to provide you with room and board, to provide you with all the testing services, and the English immersion that I think is so critical to your success. And if I could, I'll name a couple schools that we've worked with. We've worked with Florida Institute of Technology, FIT, in Melbourne, Florida. We've worked with Cochise College in Douglas, Arizona. Here's a school. It's in the middle of the desert in Arizona. There's no distractions. The runway is right next to the dormitories, so you literally walk from your dorms to your cafeteria to your classrooms to the flight line. You go fly your training sessions and walk back to your dorm. I think that's just an ideal situation for learning how to fly and really doing it in minimal time with minimal distractions to get you out there and get that seniority number as quick as possible.
Right. That's fantastic. And I know in Arizona they have like 364 perfect days a year, isn't that, you know, so I mean they have no weathered out days.
Hey Dave, I've got a lot of questions coming in, but one of them I just now got to and realized it should have been asked a slide or two back. But if a person starts in what's left of 2014 and goes through all the appropriate stuff and given everything works right, the question is, at what year would you be making roughly $100K a year?
That's a great question, John, and I think it's really going to depend on the region of the country and the level of dedication to do what it takes to get that job. But let's say that flight school, if you commit yourself full-time to going to an ab initio flight school like the one we mentioned at Cochise College, you're going to be done with your commercial multi-engine instrument type rating in under 12 months. Okay, now you're going to want to try to go offshore if you're looking for Airbus, Boeing experience. If you take a 2 to 3 year contract offshore, you're not going to make bad money, by the way, doing that. You'll be back here probably 4 years downstream. You'll be ready to enter a legacy or a airline that, you know, flying Airbuses and Boeing equipment. The entry-level pay, don't quote me on this, I think it's somewhere around the $60,000 mark, depending on what airline you go to. And by your third year in the airline, depending on your work habits, you're at a six-figure income.
Fantastic. Great. And yeah, of course, we're getting really specific questions about very specific airlines and other kinds of things. So I think what I'm gonna say is, if you have a very specific question, don't be afraid to ask it. but I don't know that we're going to get to all of them in this session, and we'll, certainly get to as many as we can after the session and correspond with you later.
Well, I've responded with a bunch of them saying we got a slide or two coming up where we're going to answer them.
Exactly. So please do feel free to ask any question you like, and understand that we may need to generalize for the purpose of this this session today, but we will definitely get back to you with specific information if it's possible to do that. Great. Next question, and is one of my favorites. Is it a good career choice for a woman to be an airline pilot?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any difference between the career opportunities for men and women. And specifically, Paula, I'll tell you why. Because the airlines do things by seniority, by date of hire seniority. That takes all of the bias out of it. So if a man and a woman are hired at the same date, they are going to upgrade with the same opportunities. They're going to have everything the same right on down the line. So I think women are very successful pilots. I've flown with many of them. I think they're very level-headed. I enjoy the opportunity to work with them because they finesse the airplane a little bit differently than I think guys do. But as far as the career opportunity, absolutely, this is a career where once you get into an airline, there really is not going to be any difference.
Great. And so have there been women go through Aerostar's program and be successful with that?
We have had a number of women go through Aerostar. We've had students as young as 20 go through a type rate program. We've had a woman that was near her 60s go through a type rate program. And we've seen the success rate really is equal with the guys that have come through. We just had a young lady that came through our type rate program, and I've asked her if I can use her name, and she said I could. Her name is Julie Mead. She was a Comair pilot. Comair went out of business. She took an opportunity to use Work Improvement Act money from the state of Kentucky and came through, did a type rating with us, and she has completed phase 1 with a major airline to fly the A320 and is waiting to hear on the phase 2 interview. So we're expecting to see her hired very quickly, flying an A320 within the next few months.
Right. Excellent. All right. Next question, and I know there's been a lot of variations of this question. I've heard there's a pilot shortage. Is there really?
And along with that, do you have lists of employers overseas and things like that that you can help people get into?
Well, John, thank you, and Paula, to answer your question first, yeah, it's not Dave saying there's a global pilot shortage. This is the aircraft manufacturers. This is the industry is now crying that there's going to be a pilot shortage. There is, we are at the beginning of a 20-year pilot shortage. Now, does that mean that absolutely every pilot is going to make it to be a wide-body captain? The answer is no. Some people are not going to apply themselves. They're not going to do what it takes to pursue that. They may not have the passion to do that. They may prefer to stay where they're at, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for those individuals that apply themselves, have a clean record, get an education, this is the best time to be a pilot we have seen in 20 years. It's just a documented fact. I think you'll get a little pushback because the pilot shortage is more prevalent outside of North America than it is in the U.S. In all fairness, we have less of a pilot shortage right now in the U.S. than we've seen in Asia, we've seen in Central and South America, and we've seen in the Middle East and Africa. That is the primary growth of the aviation industry. Still, you're seeing about I think the numbers I saw was something like 90,000 new airline pilots needed in North America over the next 20 years, and that's still a significant number. I think right now if you look at the commuter airlines, and I recently listened to the legal counsel who was speaking on behalf of the Regional Airline Association, she was talking about how they cannot fill their classes. They simply cannot get enough pilots to fill the void of the pilots at the top that are leaving to go get airline jobs. Right now in the United States, every major airline in the U.S. is hiring. That's pretty significant.
Right, right. And I think that's part of the reason that we've seen, you know, a lot of airlines, especially overseas, interested in an ab initio program. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. As the middle class is growing in a lot of the regions around the world, and they're wanting to expand the opportunity for flying, with that growth, a lot of these young men and women were not brought up with the idea that they could even be airline pilots. It was so far out of reach that really wasn't something that they were striving for. And now they're starting to find that they didn't have enough people who were aspiring to be pilots, or that even thought they could be. It seems so far out of reach that the airlines themselves are now trying to help them find a way. So they're doing more sponsorship. We've seen that with some of the ab initio programs, and that's not a new concept. Lufthansa has done that for many years. Turkish Airways is doing it with FIT. There's lots of schools out there that are catering to that ab initio to the airline. And kind of the way that works is the airline actually interviews and hires the national citizen who has zero flight time, and then they pay for them to go to flight school here in the U.S. or wherever they send them. So huge opportunities, I think, with the ab initio programs coming up. And but I wouldn't wait. I wouldn't wait to try to wait for a sponsorship. If you've got a chance to get to flight school, I would get yourself enrolled in a flight school right away.
So does Aerostar help their graduates with respect to job opportunities here or overseas?
You know, John, that's a question I get asked all the time, and my typical response is yes, but let me put a qualifier on that. We don't have a direct relationship with an airline to say, when you're a graduate of Aerostar, you're guaranteed an interview. We have had some offers like that from some commuters. We didn't feel that was a good fit for us because the people that are coming to type rate school are looking to fly Airbuses and Boeings. They're not looking to fly a regional jet.
Right.
However, we have seen a number of airlines around the world that have given preferential hiring or referred potential employees to Aerostar. Some of them, I can tell you, Vietjet has sent us a number of pilots. Tiger Airways in Australia has sent us a number of pilots. We've had pilots from airlines all over the world coming through our school. So do we directly help place you? No. We're a school. We're not a placement service. But
Right.
we try to give you the tools and the leg up so that you're in high demand to get the job.
Excellent. That's always good news. And I know we get into more detail about some of your guarantees and things like that as we go further, price guarantees and so on. But now let's go into a little bit more detail about if you can tell us about the job market in some of the different places in the world. We've had some questions about Asia. I know we have someone online from Vietnam and a couple of other places in Asia that are asking specifically about the job market there.
Great questions. And you know, this is information that's going to be based on people I've talked to. I haven't been in that job market. So let me qualify this by saying this is the information that's been relayed to us. Most of the Asian carriers are hiring, and they cannot hire enough pilots to fill the void. So they're looking at delaying deliveries, parking airplanes, not being able to operate full schedules. That tells me right there that they've got a big demand, and where there's a big demand, supply will follow.
Okay.
Now, we have seen some of the pilot placement services that we've worked with give us email after email. We just are starting a new relationship with a pilot placement service that's placing pilots all over Asia, and they are placing first officers. They're specializing, I think, more in placing first officers than captains. and they said they cannot get enough applicants in their program. So I think the Asian hiring market is probably one of the best there is. It's a tough market. It's better for a national than it is, I think, for a expat. But still, there's lots and lots of opportunities.
Okay, let me turn that around and say, what about if you are someone in Asia that wants to be a pilot in the U.S.? We've had actually a couple of questions going that direction.
Probably a little more difficult, and the reason I say that is less of a pilot shortage here than there is there. If you can get a green card or the ability to legally work in the United States, then I think you have a very good chance of landing a job in the U.S. if you meet the right credentials. The U.S. is a little tougher right now, Paula, because we've recently passed a law here. Our Congress passed a regulation that requires 1,500 hours or an ATP. There's some exceptions on the times, but let's just say an ATP. You have to have the ATP done before you can get a job with an airline. Right. That is not true anywhere else in the world. So the equivalent of a commercial pilot's license and some experience, and you're going to be able to get a first officer job flying an Airbus or Boeing in lots and lots of places around the world.
Got it.
So what is the preferred type rating right now, the A320 or the 737?
That's a great question. And if you look at statistically, and I wouldn't take it because I said so. I would go online and do some homework and due diligence. But it looks like the Airbus is starting to outpace the Boeing for new aircraft deliveries. You've seen a lot of the Boeings retiring. You see the Airbus staying in there a little bit longer. So I think you're going to see more Airbus airframes, and the Airbus airframe difference tells me there's more jobs on the Airbus.
Cool. All right, so continuing kind of our little tour of the world, how about Africa?
You know, Africa is definitely an up-and-comer. The aviation industry in Africa has really been stifled because it's, you know, not the most industrious region of the world. But you're starting to see the early seeds of industrialism. You see a lot of vacationers going there. Now, we just had this whole Ebola scare, so that might put a crimp in it for a little bit. But we are seeing that industry growing there. Airlines starting up, they're flying Airbuses, they're flying 737NGs, and that means that there's going to be opportunities in the future. Not as good as Asia. I don't think as good as Central and South America, but I think probably on par with what we'll see here in the U.S. or in Europe.
Okay. Let's just continue with Latin America. Since you started down that road, we'll keep going.
Yeah, Latin America, of course, is the middle class is growing there. They're becoming much more industrialized, much more into the banking industry in certain parts of Central and South America. And I think you're going to see a lot of growth. You're already seeing that in places like Mexico with Vueling, with Interjet. You're seeing that in Brazil with Azul, which is doing very, very well and outpacing any other airline, I think, in growth. You're seeing that with Avianca. Recently, the TACA group merged with Avianca. And we've had some very good friends with Aerogal, which is the airline of Ecuador, now part of that Avianca group. I think those guys are going to do very, very well. Lots of opportunities down there. On that one in particular, I have a very, very close friend of mine whose son decided to follow in his father's footsteps to be an airline pilot. He went to American Flyers, which is an ab initio school, and then he went and got a type rating, and he got hired by Avianca in Bogota, Colombia, and currently today is serving as a first officer for the airline on the A320. Did not have any CFI experience, did not have any other experience, got hired right out of type rating into Avianca.
Fantastic. Great. How about Europe?
Europe is a little bit, I think, more like the United States. You've got airlines like Lufthansa, which has really kind of paved the pathway for ab initio, and they've really shown the rest of the world how to do an ab initio program. They've been doing that for years. So I think Lufthansa's got a steady feed of pilots, and of course Lufthansa Group owns a number of other European airlines. But you're seeing airlines like EasyJet and Ryan Airlines, and a lot of startup, small, low-cost carriers. Those small, low-cost carriers really afford opportunities for young people to join a beginning team on the ground level and build their time. Example there, I have a very good friend of mine who went over, and I think he was flying for an airline out of Prague in the Czech Republic, built his time up there. They hired him very low time, and he is now, I believe, with Virgin Atlantic, flying wide bodies, landed his dream job.
Fantastic.
While she's going through this, Dave, what did it cost you from private to commercial? Any ideas how much you spent? And then should they go to, if they're going to go that route and become a CFI, should it be Part 61 or 141? What would you suggest?
You know, my flight training was done so long ago, I would hate to compare the cost of flight training because, you know, I was in flight school literally 30 years ago, coming up through the ranks. And it was a different time. But I would say right now, on average, people are probably spending to go from 0 time through the commercial multi-instrument and type rating, including room and board, anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000. There are schools that can do it less than that. There are schools that you can spend a lot more. If you add in an education on top of that, like for example, if you're going to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University or some of the other prestigious 4-year aviation universities, it can be significantly more than $100,000 to get the 4-year degree and all the flying.
Right.
One of the cool experiences we've looked at, like we talked about Cochise. Cochise really has a program that is a a la carte, where you could do the private instrument commercial multi-engine. It's under $60,000.
Yeah.
If you add the room and board on there and a type rating, you're still under $80,000. Now, $80,000, John, that's a lot of money. I mean, I got to tell you, if I was a young person trying to come up with $80,000, that's a whole lot of money. But again, the return on investment, if you've got those funds, if you've got those opportunities available to you, you're going to be able to earn that money back.
Right. Well, and you compare that to the cost of a 4-year degree in just about any other field, and you know, $80,000 is really not that much, you know, compared to what it would take to get even a bachelor's degree in, you know, English or social science or, you know, anything else, where the job is not as cool. You know, you're going to end up behind a desk. Like some of the rest of us. But
one of the listeners is at school at Florida Tech, and they're wondering if they get a chance to get into the regionals after they graduate. So I don't know if that means if they've been through a type school or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got to tell you that I think if they're going to stay domestic U.S., there are going to be a lot of regional airline jobs available for them. So the problem that you're going to have right now in the U.S. is you cannot get a regional job until you have your ATP.
Right.
So the U.S. is operating under a new system that's really challenging for the young men and women that are coming into the market right now, because they've got this legal barrier of trying to get to 1,500 hours before they can go off to the regionals. And this is where you asked me, John, earlier, and I want to circle back to that. If you're flight instructing to build that 1,500 hours, and I certainly flight instructed, I enjoyed it. A lot of my friends hated it. It just depends on your personality. But if you like flight instructing, it's not going to matter whether you're doing it in a 91 or 141 as far as the potential airline employer is going to look at.
I think, though, that the 141 schools, depending on the school, might be more structured, and they might be targeting more ab initios that are doing more airline-centric training, like how to use a checklist the way we do in the airlines, or how to follow SOPs the way it's done in the airlines. I think there's some benefit to that.
Right.
Cool.
And so, yeah, just to finish up, and you kind of just did, with the market in North America has been pretty dramatically impacted by that ATP, CTP requirement, right?
It has been. It's been really impacted, and we're not exactly sure how we're going to get over this hurdle, except my hope is that the United States becomes kind of the flight training capital, ab initio flight training capital of the world. What that does is it brings the foreign pilots here to the U.S. so they get the English immersion, they get the use of our open skies airspace, and they're taught by young Americans that are looking to build their flight time. So it becomes a symbiotic relationship where we are helping to train the world, and our pilots, our young men and women, are becoming the instructors to the world as they build their time. And that really is a win-win for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Right. That makes a lot of sense. So let's move on. I know we've got a lot of questions coming in, which is fantastic. It's good to hear this. How do I get started? And there's a lot of variations on this theme, but maybe you can start in general, and we'll get into some of the more specific questions that are coming in.
Well, first of all, if you're a zero time, you don't have any flight experience, and you don't have anybody to turn to, which is, in most cases, that's like myself, you're starting from scratch, I would encourage you to find a mentor. Find a pilot, and one of the things that we try to do at Aerostar is provide mentoring services where we can to at least get you steered in the right direction. Call around, do your due diligence. There isn't one answer. There's multiple answers. Call around, talk to some schools, talk to some other professional career pilots, and you'll be surprised. They want to help you. They want to see you be successful, and they're willing to give you a wealth of knowledge to try to help you.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then if you started your training but didn't finish for whatever reason, and we've got tons of reasons here, and we may need to take some of these offline because I know we need to keep moving a little bit. But what if I started my training but didn't finish? What steps would you take to figure out what's next and how to get from here to there?
Yeah, that's a great question because some people just got demoralized over the fact that we went through a 20-year downturn in the industry, and they kind of lost the belief that they were going to be successful, so they withdrew. I would say if you started your training and this is what you want to do for a career, get back into it. I don't care how old you are, what your status is. If you can pass a flight physical, and if you're average intelligence with a clean record, I would dive in by getting back to a flight school, a 141 flight school, and get enrolled and get your flying back on track as quickly as possible. If you can manage it, I really strongly encourage the full-time ab initio training like at Cochise College or FIT, where you can get it done quickly. Because you're doing it every day, you're immersed in aviation. It'll save you money in the long run. It'll get you done quicker.
Right.
2 quick questions. Who paid for your first type rating, an airline or you?
My first type rating was paid by an airline. My first type rating was a Learjet, and that was paid by a company called Coletta Flying Services back in about early 1990s. Now, I guess the follow-up question to that, John, would be, is it hypocritical to recommend others to buy a type rating? Well, I paid for my education, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could have got a job to pay for my education, but they didn't. I had to pay for that on my own. If a type rating is a tool that gives you an advantage or a leg up, then I think I would set the ego and the pride aside and just be impartial about it and say, what's the return on this investment? If this is going to give me a leg up, it's going to get me in the door quicker, I'm going to get a return on that investment. Is it worth it to me to take that step? It's not worth it to everybody. But
Right.
for a lot of people, it's a career accelerator. And I would suggest a career accelerator means more money, better benefits, a better quality of life. That's really a decision that they're going to have to make.
Absolutely. And I know we covered this a little bit, but if we want to go quickly over how much does a program cost? And I know you talked about the ab initio programs and then also the type rating programs, and just the basics of what that includes.
And follow up with, why should I take a course at Aerostar?
Well, I know we're going to get to that as well. We got a slide for that. So.
No, and I think that's a great, I like that question. In fact, I think everybody should ask that of every school. So you have to look at yourself first and say, what's my expectation? What do I want? I pride myself and the rest of our team at Aerostar on the fact that we are pilots. We're out there doing this every day. I flew 2 legs in the A320 yesterday. So when I say I'm current, I mean that I'm out doing it about half the month. I take great pride in bringing that experience to my students. And I think that's important. I think it's also important to train with a school that isn't looking at you as a dollar sign and isn't looking at you as a number. We really consider ourselves a boutique-style training center. We really take great pride in getting to know our students, developing a relationship with them, creating a learning environment that's positive. It's not we're not running a pilot factory where you're just a number we're trying to force through a pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we speak to that when you look at the ratios of our graduates. Like 97, 98% of our graduates graduate on budget. A little less, couple less percent graduate on time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody says, well, why is there a difference? Because we respect the fact that not everybody's a robot and they don't learn at the same rate. So if somebody's having some training difficulties, we try to mediate their training difficulties without charging them extra for it. And we have a published remediation training plan that says, hey, if you do have a problem, we're going to give you so many hours at ground school, we're going to give you so many hours of additional instructor support to try to get you through on budget. The last thing we want to do is charge you extra. We want you to graduate, do a great job, feel good about yourself, go out and land a job so that you'll tell everybody you had a great experience at Aerostar. And if you ask around to our graduates, I think you'll hear that from them.
Right. A question that kind of goes along with, what's included and what's not, and this is just probably a fairly simple one, is do you offer any line training or contracts?
So no, we don't directly offer any line training or contracts. That's fairly uncommon in the U.S. and North America. It is common in other parts of the world. However, we do have referrals to companies, and we're developing a new relationship with a company that does offer line flying. So line flying is where you would actually pay somebody to fill the seat to go out and operate as a first officer or captain. You're basically paying them for the privilege of building some time with them.
Right.
We do have referral partners that do that, but our focus is on providing great training. Placement, we're not a placement service, but again, we find that our training is pretty well recognized and our graduates are in fairly high demand. Does that mean that every graduate is going to land a job? Of course not. But it means that a significant number of our graduates who go out there and put forth the work and try and beat on doors and update their resumes and get their word out there, they're going to land a job in that first 12 months after graduating from Aerostar.
Fantastic.
Do you have any in-house check airmen? I mean, when they get done, how do they get their type rating?
That's a great question, John, and yes, we do. In fact, I'm one of the in-house, it's called a training center evaluator, and I am a training center evaluator for the A320. So we use almost exclusively our own evaluators. We're really representing the FAA in that role, so there isn't any difference between in-house or FAA, but it just makes it easier for scheduling purposes, and we do offer that.
Right. I know you already talked about the training locations. You have Orlando, and you have a new one that, if you wanted to mention that one.
Well, we currently have Orlando for the Airbus A320. We have Miami for the A320, the Boeing 737 NG, and the Boeing 737 Classic. We have an approved satellite in Fort Lauderdale for the A320. And we have some new pending locations. I can't go into a lot of details about those, but I will tell you they're in the Southwest United States, and they're using existing training centers used by airlines. We would use those simulators to provide our students those training opportunities. And not just type ratings. We talk a lot about type ratings, but Aerostar is in the approval process for the new ATP CTP course that does require time in a simulator, and we'll be offering those courses and those programs fairly soon.
Right. Next question, and we need to move a little bit more quickly, so that just quickly about, does Aerostar offer a guarantee?
Well, we get asked about guarantees all the time, and what I say to people is, we can't guarantee that you're going to pass. That would be illegal, in fact. What we do guarantee you is that we're going to provide you remedial training, and we're going to do everything we can to get you to pass.
Right.
Do we guarantee that you are going to get a job? No, but we have a job assurance program that says if you don't get a job and you took one of our standard type rate programs, in 12 months, we'll do a recurrent program for you. Basically, it's at cost. It's actually below cost, just to keep your proficiency up so that you can stay fresh in that job market. I don't think anybody else is doing that. And that actually costs us money. And I'll tell you why. I've had some people call me and say, oh, that doesn't cost you anything. Yes, it does, because we don't own our own simulators. We rent the simulators. So we're renting that simulator for you because we believe that we're not going to have to do that for a whole lot of people. And to date, I think we've had to do the job assurance recurrent less than a dozen times. Why?
Wow.
Because everybody gets a job.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's take the last couple of seconds and just talk about, what people who are interested in getting started should do in the next couple of weeks.
Well, it's kind of important right now if you're sitting on the fence about doing a type rating program. We've had a unique opportunity given to us by some of our simulator providers where they gave us a little bit of a discount. We're passing 100% of that on to you, our valued customers. So if you're interested, these are the best rates and the best tuition that we have ever offered at Aerostar. And the way to get started is just to email us, call us, get in touch with Elizabeth. Elizabeth is your first point of contact. She will get you sent out an application like any other school. Complete the application. Do your due diligence. Make sure that we're the right fit for you. And if we are, let's get you enrolled and get you signed up for a class.
Absolutely. So basically, if you're sitting at your computer right now, now's probably as good a time as any to just type out a real quick email to info@aerostartyperatings.com. If you have questions that didn't get answered, ask them, and basically get started. Elizabeth can send you documentation and other things to get started, or you can call the phone number, and you may not get through because we've got a lot of people on the call, and if everybody calls Elizabeth on the phone, she's going to go nuts.
And guys, I'm going to be on the info@aerostartyperatings.com for the next couple hours. So it'll be Elizabeth and I trying to answer everybody's emails. Again, do I think this is the perfect opportunity for everybody? No, I don't. And if I don't think we're the right opportunity for you, I will certainly do my best to point you in the right direction to try to help you. Bottom line is, we are pilots who are trying to help other pilots obtain career success. And if we can make a difference for you, give us that opportunity, whether you enroll in our program or enroll in somebody else's. We'll certainly try to help get you in the right direction.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dave. I know this was hard for you to get away from all the training you've been doing and all the flying you've been doing to do this, but it was great to give us the opportunity to ask you a bunch of questions, and personal questions, some of them, and take it from there. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you, John, and thanks for everybody that joined. It really was a privilege to be here with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.